So welcome everyone to another interactive session on career guidance. Today we have another exciting opportunity to learn about a completely different field of study from those that we have seen in the past, and that is law. And in the famous quotes of Thomas Jefferson, the study of law is useful in a variety of points of view. It qualifies a man to be useful to himself, to his neighbors, and to the public. So with that, I welcome Preethi Kolluri, who is a lawyer by training from the National Academy of Legal Studies and Research, famously called the NALSAR University of Law in Hyderabad, which is one of the top leading law schools in the country. So welcome Preethi to this session, and thanks for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so let's get started by knowing more about yourself. Just in brief, how has your journey been so far?
So I graduated from NALSAR University in 2016. I joined right after my 12th standard. What I did was a 5-year integrated program in a BA and an LLB. So it's a 5-year combined degree. I've been working for the last about, I think it's been 4.5 years. Soon as I graduated, I worked with a law firm in Bombay. After that, I worked with a Supreme Court judge as his assistant in Delhi. And since then, I've been practicing at the High Court in Hyderabad.
I see. Exciting. So before we go deeper into knowing various aspects of law, could you, like, in very brief terms, explain what comes under law? What is this profession of law?
Yeah, so there are very different ways of being a lawyer. I know, like, the first thing that whenever someone says law is a very, like, our first idea, I think, comes from movies where we see like very sort of argumentative, dramatic scenes come into our head. But that's not the only way which you can be a lawyer. So I am what is called a litigator. So I do go to court every day. My job is to argue cases before a judge. So when someone comes to me, tells me they have a problem, I practice what is called both civil and commercial law. So commercial law is about companies. So my clients are both like regular people like you and me, as well as companies that come to me with their problems. And they tell me I have an issue. So I file a case for them. So I draft, I write their problem, I file it in the court, and then I go and argue before a judge. So I'm what is called as a litigator. That's a litigating lawyer. There's other ways in which you can be a lawyer as well. You can be a lawyer in a law firm. I don't know if how many of you have seen a TV show called Suits. So that's a law firm lawyer. So you sit in a fancy office and you work on like very large, big deals but that's a lot of transactional work. So that's contract drafting, etc. You don't go before a court. Apart from that, of course, you can become like an academician. So you can study law. You can do a PhD in law, you can do a master's, then you can become a professor who teaches law. So that I think is like a broad sets of the kinds of lawyer you can be.
Sure. I'm really curious to know more about like deeper into various aspects of this profession. But before that, what got you excited about law? How did you go into the field? Was there an event or a person in life that motivated, inspired you?
So I actually personally myself, like most of us, was asked to go into engineering.
Okay,
so in my 11th and 12th, I studied science as well, and I wrote a bunch of engineering exams also, but that was not my primary area of interest. So I myself started looking up other professions that I can take up, and then I learned of these national law colleges that I thought was really interesting, because what they offered was a combined course in arts as well as law. So the idea between the your national law universities is that they want to develop well-rounded lawyers who know a lot more about the world. So they teach us social sciences first. They teach me a little political science, they teach me history, they teach me sociology. That way that my understanding of the law gets more informed.
Sure.
So what attracted me to the law was actually this integrated program that I ended up studying.
Yeah, you spoke about a couple of courses that they teach you in a law school.
Yeah.
So in general, if one goes to any law school, what are some of the broad courses that he or she will learn in
Sure.
4 to 5 years of your integrated course?
Sure. So the way that these programs are structured is I studied a BA and a BL, right? So my major is both in arts as well as law. In my initial years, as soon as I went after 12th standard, I got to study some humanities and social science subjects. So in my first, say, 4 or 5 semesters, I studied subjects like history, I studied sociology, I studied political science, I studied literature, but with the perspective of law. So my subjects were called law and literature. So I read novels that were about the law. I read different like short stories that were about the law in my law and literature course. After which, then of course, in my later years in college, you have to study the mandatory law subjects. So you study different kinds of laws. You study constitutional law, you study criminal law, you study contract law. As such, so there is no specialization. All of everyone who goes to law school has to briefly study all kinds of law. Your specialization then depends post your college. You can do a master's in a specific area of law if you want to, or usually you end up practicing a certain kind of law, and that's how you develop your specialization.
Sure. So from what I understand, in the 5 years, you learn bits of every specialization, right? And
Yeah,
then
that's
your interest, you choose to do one particular or like deeper study into one particular field. I
that's
hear
right.
a lot of these terms, which is corporate lawyer, criminal lawyer,
Yeah.
litigator. What are some of the specializations one can pursue after having an undergrad in law?
So the in that sense, the broad specialization will probably be what is called civil law. So
Sure.
civil is your day-to-day disputes. So that will be like, I mean, if you and I have a boundary dispute saying, okay, this is your land, this is my land, that will become a civil issue. So you can be a civil lawyer. You can be a criminal lawyer that I think obviously all of us know. If you want to get a bail, who can file a bail application for you? If you want to become a defense counsel who argues for like to get someone out of jail, you become a criminal lawyer. A corporate lawyer is someone who usually works for companies. So different kinds of company disputes. You can help people set up companies. You can help people solve issues that come up within their companies. I would say those are the broad maybe sets of law, very high level broad sets of categorizations.
Sure. One follow-up question on that. How does one choose which specialization to go to? And the part to that question would also be if one chooses to go to a specific in one specific specialization, say corporate lawyer,
Yeah.
does he or she have an option to later change to maybe a criminal or a civil lawyer?
Okay. So I think the specialization, it takes a little bit of time because even now, after like almost 5 years after college, I do bits and pieces of everything. I suppose the specialization takes about like 10 years to fully develop. And the shifting also is completely self-motivated. Like if you're interested, you can always practice a different area of law. It's not as hard as the divisions are maybe as not as hard as like another profession like a doctor, for instance, where over the course of years you fine tune your skills only in one. Because in law school you study everything. You don't come out being a criminal lawyer, you just graduate with a law degree.
And how much time does it take for you to get a master's in a particular specialization?
So in India the LLM courses are for 2 years. If
LLB
you go
bachelor's degree and LLM is the master's degree, right?
That's right. An LLB is what your actually an LLB you can also do separately. You can do a BA, a BCom, or something like that, and then followed by another 3 years of an LLB.
Okay.
I did an integrated course, but otherwise it would take you 3 and 3, 6 years to become a lawyer if you choose to individually do a bachelor's followed by a law degree. And yes, the master's degree is in LLM. If you do it in India, it takes 2 years, but usually if you do it in, say, the UK or the US, it takes you a year.
Sure. Now coming to the job roles, you work with a senior advocate, right?
Advocate, yeah.
You work with him, like in his firm.
Yeah, so these are usually called chambers. But yes, in the sense, it's his firm, it's his office. The clients are his, and all of us sort of work like his assistants.
Sure.
So where I work is called a litigation chamber. But what I started off is what is called, it was a corporate law firm. And most of these national law colleges, about in your fourth or fifth year, have campus placements, and which is where a lot of big corporate law firms do come and hire on campus. That I think currently is the most, in that sense, lucrative sort of option, because they end up paying a lot of money right out of college.
Sure. So, what are some of the other job roles one can hold after having a degree in law? One,
Um,
running a firm as you did. Um,
Yeah, so a firm is one thing that you can do. Apart from that, a lot of companies hire people for their individual legal departments. So like companies like I remember in my college, companies like say Infosys or Wipro come and ask you to join their in-house legal departments. Even a lot of government sort of companies have their own lawyers as well. Those are called in-house roles in that sense, when the company hires you for itself. Apart from that, you can go join an individual lawyer, like how I am working right now, and you work like sort of his assistant. There's of course also, actually I should have mentioned, is another line of sort of career is the judiciary. You can write exams to become a judge. You can directly become like a junior civil judge or a magistrate, for which there are separate exams.
Sure. And to become a judge, do you need a particular years of experience as a lawyer?
So that actually is sort of becomes a little state specific. Different states have their own rules. But usually a minimum of 3 years, I think, of practice is the common norm for you to write a junior civil judge exam.
Sure. So let us talk about the another very important aspect of a profession, which is the lifestyle. Okay.
Yeah.
Two aspects. First is the student life, which is how are your 5 or 4 years in a law college, and once you graduate, how is a lifestyle of a lawyer? And by lifestyle, I mean, uh, is there a lot of workload? Do you have enough work-life balance? What are some of the job? What are the job locations of a lawyer? And maybe you can talk briefly about the monetary compensation.
Sure. So, in that sense, it's fairly intensive. Both college as well as post-college work life is fairly intensive. Most lawyers I know, just to describe, okay, actually, maybe I'll start with college first. College, the course load is really intensive. It involves lot of reading, a lot of writing as well. So it's very research intensive, the coursework that we do, because our semesters usually last for 4 months. And in those 4 months, you have about 4 separate assessments that happen, so for each subject, and you have 5 courses per semester that you have to do mandatorily to satisfy your credits, at the end of which, at the end of 5 years, you need to have a certain number of credits to graduate. So the predominant work in the early years is reading, massive amounts of reading that have to happen. So if I know a lawyer's job is typically thought of maybe being more vocal and conversation intensive, but no, the job is more reading, writing, thinking, and in that sense gets very intensive. And also in law school, in my law school, you're encouraged to do a lot of co-curricular activities. Co-curricular activities include things like writing for journals. We have a lot of journals that our college publishes, other colleges do, so you're encouraged to submit papers to them. Apart from that, there are what are called moot court competitions, which is basically a mock trial. So those are organized at like national levels, international levels, with different areas of law. So the process basically is, you have a sample problem and you have to prepare sort of like written arguments for both sides, and then you have to argue both sides against different college teams. So that's like a very big activity that happens usually in college.
Mhm.
Apart from that, we have debating that happens, etc. Then there's of course extracurriculars as well, sports teams, all of that is there as well. So student life is very vibrant, but very intensive because semester is only 4 months and you have to study a subject start to end within those 4 months. The year is such is usually divided into 2 semesters, and in the breaks, you're expected to intern. And there's 10 semesters in the 5 years, and in the 10 breaks, you are definitely expected to intern to build your CV. Because when you sit for job placements, or even if when you apply for masters, you have to stock up like a lot of internships. I studied in Hyderabad, but I interned in various cities. I've traveled to Bangalore, Delhi, Bombay to intern as well. And at different forums that depends on your interest on what kinds of internships you do, but you have to do because sort of to build up your CV to what you want to do after college.
What
Then
lifestyle after being
after being a lawyer, I know this might discourage a lot of people, but it's a fairly intense lifestyle. I wouldn't want to like sugarcoat it. An average workday is 10, maybe 12 hours, sometimes even more. The reason being that the initial part of your day is spent in court. I like courts functions from like 10 to 4 on an average day. And you have to go to court every single day, usually if you have cases. You have to argue there. Then you come back to office, and that's when your actual work starts because you need to prepare written briefs, you need to prepare for next day's work, and so that then usually becomes a very long day. And I think that kind of work day exists irrespective where you work. Lawyers usually tend to work a lot.
What about how much you get paid? What's the average remuneration of a lawyer?
I think right after college, the most lucrative option that I was seeing is a corporate law firm. And there's what we call tier one law firms, which there's about 6 to 7 of them. They have offices across the country, the biggest being in Bombay and Delhi. If you get picked for them right out of college, I think currently they're probably paying between, I would say 15 to 20 lakhs an annum. So that would be like that I think is the most lucrative sort of job is within a corporate law firm. The pay that you get when you work as a litigator or with individual lawyers is not particularly great. That'll be far, far lower. You'll probably start off maybe something between 30 to 50,000 a month.
I see. Okay. So you have been practicing for some time now, and you have seen your peers and seniors practice. Um, so from the perspective of the Indian the law system, can you like talk about what are the struggles of establishing yourself as a good lawyer in India, and
Sure.
how much time does it take, typical time frame for any individual to settle and earn decently as a lawyer?
Yeah. So if you get into like a corporate structure, so that works, I think, like any other company, like maybe like any other like engineering company in that sense, that you'll have like a stable growth of promotions after a couple of years that happen. But if you want to practice in a court of law, I mean, it's not meant to discourage anyone, but it gets a little difficult because the system, usually what ends up happening, especially if you come from a non-law background, is it takes you some time to establish yourself. Because even if you set up an office, people are not going to trust you, right? They don't know who you are. They're not going to understand like, okay, are you a responsible lawyer, etc. So if you come from a non-law family and like maybe your father or someone in the someone is not involved in the profession, it does take some time. And I would say like a good 10 to maybe even 15 years before you start like seeing like good amount of money.
I see. Interesting.
Yeah.
I have a follow-up question to that. I see
Sure.
movies and other TV series. One of them is Suits, of course. There are a lot of elements in the society, right, which a lawyer has to deal with. Maybe the police department or the media, or there are detectives.
Yeah.
How do these elements of the society, affect the job of a lawyer in
It
India?
does.
It
No,
does.
it affects a lot in India more than, I mean, usually the arguments in the court is like the final stage of the process. But I think that's what makes it very exciting, right? Like in that sense, my job on a day-to-day basis doesn't look the same. Like I can guarantee you that my Monday in an office is not going to look like a Thursday. because I don't know the kind of problems that a client will have, and I don't know who I have to negotiate with. You have to talk to the other side's lawyers. Sometimes you have to talk to the police. Sometimes you have to manage different stuff in a court. So yeah, there are different like stakeholders that get involved, but it's very exciting. I would say that's one of the fun parts of the job.
I see. Okay. How do you think the profession of law would evolve in the next maybe 5 to 10 years down the line? Do you think there's a lot of scope, and is the scope picking up?
Yeah, I would say so. I'd say in that sense, the field is definitely opening up, especially to like, because the kind of like the national laws universities that I was talking about, they've only been set up like, I know when I say 20 years, it seems like a long time, but now is the time when people have started recognizing that people out of these colleges actually are good lawyers. So in that sense, the profession is opening up to people who come from non-law backgrounds as well, and especially I would say like women also. I practice in Hyderabad where there haven't been too many senior lawyers who are women, but that of course is again changing. So in the 5 to 10 years, I would say that I imagine it becoming that much more accessible to someone who say has no lawyer in their family but wants to set up a practice.
I see. Okay. Um, that was interesting. Talking about how to recognize or how to identify whether you would be like someone sitting in the audience would be a good lawyer. I imagine that you need to have really good logical argument skills, also some analytical skills. Um,
True.
you know, I also think that you need to have a lot of memorizing skills because you need to remember a lot of provisions of law. Uh, can you maybe throw some light on that, and like what are some of the other personal attributes or inclinations one needs to have
Sure.
to be a successful lawyer?
Sure. So the first thing I want to say is that you don't have to be a good speaker. I
Okay.
know it sounds it sounds weird to say that considering the job is literally to argue, but I would say that's like a secondary skill that you can pick up, that you can develop once you get into the profession. I would say if you ask yourself, can I be a lawyer? The first thing I would ask is, do you like reading? And do you like reading like anything like a genuine curiosity? Because like as such there's very very different areas of law, and there's very very different kinds of laws, and sometimes even I come across new laws every day when someone asks me a problem. Like very recently someone asked me, I want to set up a newspaper, what is the process for doing it? And that's not something that you get taught in law school, right? Because that's a very very like specific special question. But literally then what do? I go, I open a book, I read up, I understand what is the act that governs that specific like question, and then I understand it also in like as I go along. So I would say like someone who likes to read a lot. And then the next thing I would say is, like you said, someone maybe who has a tendency, like a certain set of maybe analytical or logical skills, because the most important thing is when you see a problem is to break it down and then build an argument from the ground up. So I would say logical analytical skills are a very very important like part of the job, because that clarity needs to come in your head. Like if you don't understand that argument itself, you can't explain it to someone, and then obviously you can't argue it in court as well.
Or
uh,
you
yeah, apart
need very sharp memory?
yeah, I think like it does help, but I mean I wouldn't say that it's the most important. It helps because so just to take a step back, like the system in India is what is called a common law system. So we don't have a civil law system. In a civil law country there are rules for everything. So civil law countries, a lot of European countries are civil law countries. They literally have a rule for every single thing that like you're supposed to do, not supposed to do. Ours is more of a common law system. So that tends to be court evolved law.
I
So what you need to then read more is previous decisions that courts have given, and then say, hey, look, my facts are ABC. The court like 10 years ago decided a case where facts were similarly ABC. And because the court decided that way, the court has to decide the same way now. So in instances like that, yeah, it does help if you have like a decent memory skill, right? So the more that you're able to retain, the more you can connect.
I see. Interesting. Um, I mean, a lot of people in the audience are now maybe in their 9th standard or 10th standard in high school. Um, Starting from this stage, what's the part to being a lawyer or having like an undergrad degree in law? Uh, by
Uh,
that, I mean, what are some of the exams that one needs to answer? And I imagine right after 10th standard, one needs to go in arts or needs to choose arts to be a lawyer.
Not necessarily. I don't think you need to choose art.
Oh, you
So
said you can
what?
also you can have a undergrad and say you can do a BCom and then you can choose to do a 3 year.
Yeah, you can do a BCom, you can do a law, you can do a BSc and do a law as well. Some of the newer law colleges are also offering a BBA and an LLB,
I see.
because that's supposed to be like a lucrative, because if you want to practice corporate or commercial law, then like studying like a BBA
Help.
helps.
Got
And
it.
a lot of my batchmates, in fact, have done an MBA as well. Uh, so to understand, say, financial laws better.
So,
So
what are some of the exams that one needs to answer?
yeah,
And can you talk about how does one prepare for those competitive exams?
yeah.
Uh,
So
Also,
if you're not, yeah.
once you answer these exams, what are some of the top colleges in India? One of them, of course, is NALSAR, University of Law. Uh, what are some of the other colleges, top colleges in India?
Sure. So one way to do it, like I said, it's like a 3 and 3 years.
Sure.
So if you do like a BA, BSc, BCom, you can enroll yourself in any of those. That I think depends on your 12th standard marks. After which you can do followed by 3 years of that degree and then 3 years of a law degree. So those are the more some of your older universities, like maybe like Delhi University, Bombay University. In Hyderabad, we've called what is Osmania University. So that used to be, that's the more traditional way of doing it. The newer colleges are called what are called as national law universities. They have a common entrance test that's called the Common Law Admission Test, the CLAT. So that happens every year. That's similar to like say like an engineering common test. You're tested on 5 subjects. You're tested on English. You're tested on math, but the math is 10th standard math. So you don't need to know +2 math. You're tested on general knowledge, legal reasoning, and logical reasoning. So logical reasoning again is, I mean, like syllogisms or things like that, like similar to, I think, a couple of the engineering exams that you give. Legal reasoning, what they do is they give you a legal principle, they give you a problem, they ask you to apply that principle to the problem and give an answer. The test is multiple choice questions, and I think there's negative marking also now. There's about 200 questions, I think, that are there in the test. So depending on your rank in CLAT, there's, I think, about 15 national law universities now. And you can give your preferences, and based on your rank, you're allotted whichever college you'll get. That again depends on your rank in the test. To answer which of, so the some of the more traditional colleges, if you're doing the 3+3, I think DU's, it's called Campus Law Center. That's supposed to be one of the best and one of the oldest law schools in the country. If you write the common entrance test after your 12th, the best college is in Bangalore. It's called the National Law School of India University, NLSIU Bangalore. Then comes second in rank is my college in Hyderabad, NALSAR. There's a couple of other national law colleges. Number 3, I think, is Calcutta. There's a good one in Bhopal, and then Gujarat, etc.
Sure. And what are some of the resources which are available out there that one can avail in
To
preparation
study.
in
Okay.
preparation towards competitive exams? Because I think
I,
there's something called legal reasoning you said, which maybe is not taught in school or even college.
yeah.
You need a coach.
Actually, yeah, unfortunately, I think because of the way the exam has evolved over the course of years, and there's negative marking as well,
Mhm.
most people, I think, are starting to take coaching. There's coaching centers. I think I'm not sure if it's there uh, in every city, but in Hyderabad, there are a couple of coaching centers that people tend to enroll. But apart from that, there are distance coaching as well. where you can enroll yourself and you get sent material to prepare for the exam. When I wrote the exam, I mean, it involved a little lesser preparation because like the legal reasoning, etc., was very intuitive. Like they'd give you the rule in the paper itself and ask you to apply. But unfortunately, I think the competition's increased a little now, and the number of people who write it also gone up. So most people do end up taking coaching, if not for 2 years, at least for 1 year, like in their 12th standard. And you don't need to study, I would say it's not a prerequisite to study any kind of stream. Like you can study math, you can study science, you can study arts and still write it. And for those kids who don't like math, math is a very small portion of the exam. It's 20 questions and it's 10 standard level math.
Yep. What is the typical time frame for a comfortably study for these competitive exams? I know for
I
engineering, typically 2 years.
Yeah, I think like I think I know a lot of like after I've graduated, I've spoken to a lot of juniors, etc. And people who are very clear they want to study it, most people are ending up doing it for 2 years. But I would say that 1 year at least, I think, to manage to get a decent score. The
Minimum.
reason I say this is because the number of seats in each college aren't too many. So unless your rank is in the first 50, you're not going to get in NLS in Bangalore. Your rank needs to be within the first 100, maybe 150 to be able to get into NALSAR. So it gets quite competitive, which is why I would say at least a year, if not two.
Or so there are public law colleges and there are also private law colleges in the country.
Yeah, there are. So CLAT is one way. Then there's an exam called an LSAT as well, which some of the private colleges choose to use the score for. So I think in terms of private law colleges, I'd say there's a Symbiosis. Offers a good law course. There's Symbiosis in Pune, and I think there's one in Noida as well. And there's a new one that's open in Hyderabad. Apart from that, there's Jindal University that's in Delhi that offers a good law course as well. Those I think are the top two private schools, I would say. But the CLAT schools are all government colleges.
I see. What is the typical cost of becoming a lawyer? Maybe talking about tuition fees in different colleges on an average, and then maybe other miscellaneous fees if there are any.
I think like I mean there are scholarships on offer, but I think even the government colleges that you end up getting in through CLAT, they have become quite expensive. So for 5 years, I would say at least 10 lakhs would be the course fee itself, your tuition as well as the like your books, etc., whatever you need to get. And unfortunately you need to intern as well, and that ends up coming from your own pocket if you're not interning from home, if you travel to a different city. So those internships end up costing a little. So I would say maybe 10 to 15 lakhs is the cost if you go to a national law college. If you go to some of the more traditional universities, they end up being a lot less expensive. Like if I go to like a Bombay University or a Delhi University, the course fee is not so much.
I see. Okay. How is the scope of an attorney? They call it attorney in the US. How is the scope of a lawyer abroad? Say once you have a degree in law from India, is there a good scope of moving out of the country and practicing law? And do you need to get another degree from a different country?
Yeah. So because when you graduate out of a law college in India, obviously you're equipped to practice Indian law, right? So if you do want to go out to a different country and practice, you will have to do some study, at least a master's degree, and then you will have to write what are called bar exams. So bar exams is they test you on the law of wherever you are. So if you're in the US, you will have to write a bar exam depending on the state that you're in, maybe like California bar, New York bar, etc. And some of those bar exams are pretty tough. But yes, it'll involve some more studying for you to be able to practice in a different country. In terms of scope, there is definitely a lot of scope, because I know a lot of people from my batchmates from my college who've gone on to different universities in UK, in US, in Singapore, in Australia to study and then go on to practice there as well.
Interesting. I see. So you mentioned briefly about like a few misconceptions that are surrounding this profession of law. One of them that was one needs to be a good speaker. That is a misconception. Are there any other misconceptions which are floating out there about this profession?
I mean, I think maybe you should tell me, but I mean, one common question I get asked a lot is your day like court? You go yell in court and like you like say fancy dialogues to the judge and stuff. And no, it's not that exciting. Like courts are crowded, sweaty, and like you have to wait a long time for your turn because unfortunately our judicial system, we have a lot of overload in terms of the work. So it takes years and years for a case to actually go from start to finish. So it's a lot more slow, a lot more drab, and maybe not as always like every day is not as exciting as they showed in the movies. I think another misconception, I'm not sure, but it tends to be that lawyers are very corrupt and like tend to eat a lot of their clients' money and like stuff. And I'd say the proportion of corrupt lawyers is as like in any other profession, right? There are corrupt, there are non-corrupt. I think it's a choice you make in terms of what kind of lawyer you want to be.
Yeah, I think law and order is something which brings like which actually governs the society in general. As a lawyer, do you have a power to make a difference in the society in India?
I believe I do. I honestly believe I do. It's one reason that I really like. I like what I do as well. Like because I mean, obviously, we all have to make a living in that sense. So I do a lot of work that comes my way, corporate work, which I don't enjoy so much. But I also do a lot of what is called as legal aid work, which is work for people who can't afford legal fees. In that sense, they can't afford to pay for a lawyer themselves. So my High Court in Hyderabad, the Telangana High Court, has what is called a Legal Aid Services Committee. So that you can go approach it. You can tell them I can't afford a lawyer, and they allot someone to you. So I do try and balance out my work in that sense. So I do like maybe like 70-30 sort of proportion. So, and when I do that sort of work, it does help me, right? Because the problem I think is that unless you're a lawyer, the system becomes very technical and complex to an outsider, like because it has what is called a jargon. And when I say jargon, it's like a very specific terminology which you only understand if you've studied it tends to become very obscure. So in that sense, like it can be very frustrating as well if you don't have a good lawyer. Like you're often like you don't know what to do, like literally like a simple thing being like if you want to get like a marriage license, or if you want to like get like title documents for your house, the systems tend to be a little complex. So when I actually help break it down and make it more accessible to people, I find it very rewarding.
I see. I'm just curious to know, I mean, I've seen it in movies and a TV series. To become a criminal lawyer, is there a threat to your life? Is there a threat to your life? Is it a dangerous profession?
I mean, I think that depends on the kind of criminal lawyer you are, but yeah, I mean, it definitely involves working with the police a lot, especially if you're a criminal trial lawyer. So if you're a lawyer who goes to court every day and tries to disprove like charges. So the way a criminal case works is that it's the job of the government to prosecute someone. So an underlying principle of criminal law is that when I commit a crime, I commit a crime against society at large. So if I murder you, I don't just cause harm to you, I cause harm to the society because I'm disrupting like a normal course of life, right? So which is why the government takes up the case and the government builds the case. And as a criminal defense lawyer, it's my job to fight against the government and say that they've not done a good job to show that the crime has happened. So in that process, yes, you do end up like working a lot with the police, working a lot with different parts of the government. And yeah, I think that comes with its own complications.
I see. Okay. I think that was it. I think we have covered most of the aspects of this profession, and I personally have learned a lot about this field, and I'm hoping that many in the audience would have too. before we wind up, is there one final piece of practical advice which I typically ask all the speakers for the students in the audience? Not maybe
Uh,
related to law, but maybe general about career, choosing career, and maybe in life.
yeah. I mean, I'd say don't succumb to pressure of what is expected of you, because the thing is that like I know that what I find really strange is that you're expected to make like a decision that affects your entire life when you're like 17 or 18, when you absolutely know nothing, right? Like you don't really understand how the world works, and you're expected to choose a profession for the rest of your life. So I'd say take your time, don't succumb to pressure, talk as many people as you can, and I think a great resource is honestly Google. Like literally just look things up, and everything is so much more accessible now. So like Google as much as you can, talk to many people, reach out on different like maybe social media or something. But yeah, don't just do what is expected of you, because if you I think I don't know about you, but I think unless you like what you do, you won't do it well.
True. I agree. Thanks, Vidhi.
No.
So thanks a lot for doing this. I think it's time we just end the interactive session between us. It's time to take questions from the audience if there are any. So I request people to either write their name in the chat or write the entire question in the chat, and I can maybe read it out to Preethi if there are any. Yes. So I've allowed participants to unmute. There's Angad Sapirkar. You can go ahead and ask the question. Angad? I think we can take the next question. It's a question from Brenda. Is doing law after 12th better than doing law after graduation, or is it opposite? Which is which is best?
uh I personally, because I did the 5-year course, I'd say it's probably better to do the integrated course, because the integrated course, number one, takes lesser time. Very obviously, you'll be done in 5 years as opposed to 6. The other thing also, I think, is if you come from a non-lawyer family, the newer colleges which are doing the integrated course tend to give you a lot more opportunities. So it's easier for you to get on campus placements. It's a great alumni network through which you can learn of internships, learn of other offices you can join. So I probably say I would say that the integrated option is probably better if you don't come from like a lawyer family.
I see. Okay. That was one. The second question is, we can do a live course part time, right? I think he means we can do a library course part time. Is it advisable? I am not sure what
And
library course
as
part.
in an LLB course part time, is that the
LIB? Oh, is it LLB? Okay.
yeah, you can definitely, like if you do your BA, BCom, etc., you can after that you can do a part-time LLB course as well. It's just that the again it gets the more non-traditional ways of doing this, it gets a little difficult to find career opportunities. You'll have to go out on your own, look for jobs, apply for jobs, etc. So, but yeah, it's possible. It's definitely possible to do it part-time.
Okay. I forgot to ask you one question during the session, and that was, what about online degrees? There are a lot of courses which are being offered online. A lot of degrees which
Yeah.
are being offered online, especially in engineering and even an MBA. Is there something similar to that for law?
You mean like a completely online sort of
Online.
course, right? Like, yeah, I would advise against it.
Okay.
I mean, there are some, but I would advise, I'd say go to college, like
Okay.
if you can, because
Sure.
the learning is much more.
Okay. Thanks. There's one more question. If a lawyer is practicing in one state, can he or she represent a client in another state?
The answer is yes, but you will have to be accompanied by someone who's from that state. So, to get a little technical, I can't be on record as a filing counsel in another state, but I can argue. So, someone will have to file the case and they can get me to argue the case for them in a different state.
Okay. Interesting.
But the licenses are given per state. So, you're enrolled as a lawyer with a state bar council.
Interesting. I think that answers the question. Uh, the next question is, what are the small steps teens can do to be a lawyer, like study a subject more better?
Honestly, I would actually, more than any subject, I'd say read newspapers.
Okay.
Read, develop like a good general knowledge, get a sense of like what is happening with the world, like in terms of politics, what a good, like, important decisions the Supreme Court is coming up with. That I think will help you, like a good knowledge of civics, a good general knowledge. And I think that should be good by the time you get to college.
Sure. Okay. I think that answers too. There's one more question which says, what about solicitors in India? Do they have a better work-life balance?
So actually, so that system sort of has become is, I know especially in the Bombay High Court, there is a solicitor's exam that you can write. It's a slightly long explanation, but this is it's a remnant of a British system, wherein a solicitor is someone who writes the case, like literally writes the brief, files it in court, and a barrister is someone who makes the verbal arguments. So the solicitor will take the file to the barrister, who will then actually represent in court. So, but that system in India is sort of dying out. And unless you're going to practice in Bombay, and if you write the solicitor's exam, it's an additional qualification for you. That gives you a little bit of like a better chance at jobs. But otherwise, across the country, it's a system that's dying out. That difference doesn't exist, very honestly, very much anymore.
I see. Interesting. The next question is, are advocates very different than lawyers, or are these terms used interchangeably?
Interchangeably.
They're used interchangeably. Okay. I think those are all the questions we have. Yeah, I think those are all the questions. We have one comment saying that he found the session very interesting and would like to have. And okay, a question, comment from the.
If there's more questions, please feel free to write to me, Saurabh. I can maybe get back to you.
Yeah, so that is typically what I suggest is I ask them to write to me or email me, and then I can get back to you and write them.
Yeah, and if anyone's interested in writing the exam, etc., also, like, please let me know. I can help out in any way.
Sure. I think we have covered most of the aspects of it, and again, taken a lot of questions from the audience too. I think with that, it's the time we end the session. So thanks, Preethi, for joining us and sharing all your valuable insights and experience.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
All right. All the best and see you.
I see you. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.